Real happiness, the secret formula human beings are after, no matter which country, religion, or socio-cultural background a person is from. Interestingly, something that has different meaning for each individual. Therefore, happiness is one of the most abstract and subjective phenomena that we ever encounter. However, when we look into it with a general perspective, we see people fulfill this need in two different ways. For some, happiness is an instant pleasure. We are talking about happiness and feeling good that are felt in certain moments. That's the ultimate purpose. On the other hand, for some, it has such a wider meaning. It is much longer, which means it is rather the distance than the aim. It is the search itself. Now that is where hedonism and eudaimonia separate. We will take a look at these two different kinds of definition of happiness. Let's talk about hedonism first. It has a past going back to the 4th century BC. Ancient philosophers used to think hard about these issues. According to one of these philosophers, Aristippus, a student of Socrates, the main aim of life is pleasure, maximizing the pleasure. There were countless of philosophers for centuries who supported that idea, increasing the pleasure that the mind and body gets and minimizing the pain. For instance, we can say that the American culture is mostly consisted of people seeking that kind of happiness. Popular culture, Hollywood movies, and the lifestyles of rich people in social media have a big impact for imposing it. Seeking for instant happiness and maximizing it is a general summary of hedonist happiness. Right at the opposite, there is the other kind, eudaimonic happiness, which means good fortune as the definition of the word. A term that goes back to Aristotle and even Socrates, the phenomenon of prosperity in the general form. Especially, it is based on Aristotle's definition of happiness, goodness, virtue, and prosperity in his The Ethics of Aristotle's book, which is regarded as dedicated to his son Nicomachus. It says that happiness and virtue are the basics of a good person and a good society, and states that even the political philosophy should be based on these terms. Therefore, he describes eudaimonic happiness as the best type of happiness. Actually, the exact definition of the word is not the typical happiness we are accustomed to. Therefore, we need to elaborate it a little. Let's go a little deeper. Generally, when we think about happiness, the activities and experiences that give us pleasure come in mind. Eating our favorite dessert, traveling, or simply state of peace because of the lack of something that makes us stressful. Experts define this kind of happiness as hedonic, meaning instant pleasure. In fact, it is the fastest and easiest way to feel good, the state of a full satisfaction without any negative feelings. That being said, it seems as an ideal approach for happiness. However, there are so many that regard this kind of happiness as vulgar, since Aristotle's. For instance, the Stoics distance themselves from it, since they state that a constant seeking for pleasure by ignoring all the negative thoughts makes us slaves of our desires. It is regarded as the reason we sacrifice our long-term goals and the discipline that leads us to them for the sake of instant pleasures. However, we shouldn't see hedonic happiness as something we need to avoid completely. Sometimes it is really helpful to stay away all the negative thoughts and chase some instant happiness. What we are talking about here actually is creating some kind of balance. Now, as for the constant happiness, for instance, without focusing on the question why do we live for? What is our main goal in life? Without improving ourselves, without breaking the routine, without self-realization, is it possible to achieve real happiness? As being depending on how you define happiness, it has a short answer. No. The stories of happiness we encounter today lack exactly that perspective. They generally have the wrong message. No one talks about the search for meaning, goals, or self-realization. At this point, eudaimonic happiness steps in. It provides the answer to the question, what is the key to a better life? Even though it leads to some discussions, Eudaimonic well-being is regarded as based on 6 basic stages according to the long-term research and case studies and questionnaires, which are following. The first one is autonomy, meaning independence. We are talking about a person who does not rely on others' opinions that much, who determines their own way and not being afraid of walking on it. The second one is self-acceptance, accepting oneself with positive and negative features and searching ways to improve oneself. The third is meaning, finding a meaning in life beyond instant pleasures that leads our decisions and deeds, a meaning that illuminates our way like a guide. The fourth is self-improving. We are talking about the need of discovering the real potential of yourself and chasing the meaning we mentioned by using it. The fifth is control. By using the inner abilities and the external sources, changing and manipulating the environment in need, having the control of your life. And finally, positive relationships. We are talking about having relationships with the ones who share your needs, desires, and point of view in life, and having a positive effect on you. If you see all of them in general framework, it means you are close to a real, constant happiness. As you can gather, when we look at the concept of happiness with these points, we have a more comprehensive and real definition of happiness. As we mentioned earlier, in a world which is in a constant change, we might find ourselves chasing after the things we really do not need, aiming for instant pleasures and happiness. When we realize it, it might be too late sometimes. We might ignore the things that leads us real happiness and self-discipline that we need to achieve it. That's why the experts started focusing on these ignored concepts and emphasizing the importance to discover the real potential and improving it. They also believe that eudaimonic approach is crucial for occupational improvement, family relations, and societal developments as much as self-happiness. So happiness is not something we can easily point out and describe. It is a concept that has numerous different layers and features. Even though it is important to have a eudaimonic approach to achieve a meaningful life, it is important not to ignore instant happiness and pleasure to maintain a general positive state of nature. So it is important to find and create the balance between hedonic and eudaimonic happiness. Without the other, neither of them has a meaning actually. What we are trying to say is we generally all know what hedonic happiness and the things that give us instant pleasures. That's why it is important to focus on finding the things that will provide us a more meaningful life in the long term. It is necessary to ignore the cliché that states money doesn't buy you happiness and comprehend the importance of general well-being and prosper and creating time for yourself and your abilities. Investing you, discovering your abilities and getting new ones, and improving yourself are the main ways in order to achieve the real inner happiness. To sum it up, we wish you a life that you accept yourself as a human being with positive and negative features. A life that have a meaning through discovering your true self and having people you can improve and grow up together.